Welcome to the Conscious Resistance Live. My name is Derrick Broze. Today is Saturday, November 22nd, 2014. Thank you guys for tuning in, whether you're listening on our SoundCloud or you're watching the video on our YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Please subscribe to both of those, and also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at TheConsciousRN for the Conscious Resistance Network. You can also hear this show throughout the week on Liberty Movement Radio and find the videos on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Shout out to Mike Shanklin and all those good people over there doing work on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Now, before we get into the show for the day, I'd like to give you a wrap-up of the latest articles to come out of our network, The Conscious Resistance, which is a collection of vloggers, writers, activists, philosophers, and spiritually seeking people who write about consciousness, liberty, anarchy, philosophy, hallucinogens, alternative treatments for PTSD, things like that on that conscious plane that you might not find, and I guarantee you likely won't find any other place on the internet. So check us out there. This week we had a new article from one of our contributors, Anthony, who put out an article called The Sterilization War on Women, and on pregnant women, actually. Pretty interesting stuff. If you've never looked into that, please start there. Katie Chaos put out a new video, a new vlog called Coming Out as an Anarchist. Pretty interesting stuff, and I think whether or not you identify as an anarchist or not, it's something that you could probably relate to. Really just asking the idea, how do you come out and speak to your family and your loved ones about the topics and concerns you have that for some of us have become our very life, living as full-time activists, or most of the time activists communicating these ideas, and as you know, they seep into your daily conversations. So how do you express that to your family and those close to you? Do you try to talk to them about your concerns, or do you keep that world separate? And Jeff for Justice, an occasional contributor, put out an interview he did with Gary Johnson on open debates and anti-gay discrimination. Gary Johnson, of course, the former Libertarian Party presidential candidate, possible presidential candidate again in 2016, for those of you who are into that kind of thing. Now, the first part of the show, we're going to cover a number of topics that are going on in the world. We're going to just do a quick news blast through, I think we got 5 or 6 stories that happened this week that I want to cover before we get into the meat of the show, which is a couple other things going on in the world that we'll spend some more time diving into and asking some important questions. And if you're interested to find more about these topics, because I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly, you can find all of my work, because all these articles are coming from things that I've written throughout the week, stories that I'm keeping my eye on, that are on my radar. You can go to Derrick Broze, BROZE.contently, like contently.com, and all my articles from Tony Stiles, from the Anti-Media, from the Conscious Resistance, Ben Swan, the Liberty Beat, can all be found there. And that's where you'll find these stories if you want to go deeper for yourself. So let's get into this news blast. Surveillance reform bill, supposed bill that promised to reform the NSA's massive surveillance program on Americans. It fell 2 votes short of passing with a count of 58 to 42. The bill had the support of several tech companies, including Apple, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Google, and the fight against this bill was led by Senator Mitch McConnell. McConnell said the programs are an important part of the war on terror. Now, this is an interesting topic that deserves your attention, mainly because, well, why do we care about legislation? You know me, I don't pay much attention to what's happening in that political realm, but the angle that people are taking on this, the Republicans, of course, saying that we need this surveillance to keep fighting and chasing terrorists around the world with their false war on terror. But at the same time, apparently, sections of this reform bill would have actually reauthorized other parts of the Patriot Act. And this is how these things pass. For those who aren't paying attention, legislation gets shoved through, and there's tacked on other bills that are either going to fund projects that you probably wouldn't support, or pass legislation that they normally wouldn't get support for if they actually told us they were voting on it. So that seemed to be the case with this NSA surveillance reform bill. Now, another topic of concern and really saddening in my eyes because I've been following the story for a while, is the story of journalist Barrett Brown, who is currently incarcerated in a federal prison in Dallas, Texas. I was planning to go to Dallas this coming week to visit for his sentencing hearing, which just got delayed, I think, till the middle of December. And this is an important case for a number of reasons. I won't go too far into the details here for this segment, but I've done segments on Barrett Brown. Search my name and Barrett Brown. There's also an article I wrote about Barrett Brown's case and the gag order and why this is important and why activists and journalists should be paying attention to what's happened to him. And he's been incarcerated for over 2 years now without a trial. Only recently, was found guilty. He was on a gag order for over a year. Nobody on his team, his attorneys, nobody could talk about the case. And it's been a horrible case to keep up with, and I'm hoping that when they finally do sentence him this December, if it doesn't get delayed again, that he will be given time served and released, and that will be that. But please do look into the case of Barrett Brown, who he is, and why that matters. The next one's a little bit actually positive. Some positive things going on in the world. Well, there's always positive things happening in the world. We got to remember that. But sometimes there are tools that are developed and ideas that are combating the surveillance and police state. This is one of the many benefits of technology and the internet, is so many people around the world. We are not alone. I think that we've finally gotten past that. If we could measure this period of awakening, the past 10 years and really past 40, 50 years that people have been awake, and even longer than that, opposing capitalism or industrialism, imperialism, the state, opposing this machinations that work against freedom and destroy our lives. There are now, in this evolution of resistance to that with the internet, we're realizing, holy shit, we're not alone. So we're connecting, and we're using technology to create new, awesome, amazing solutions, and it's a powerful thing. And we need to highlight those and share these with each other. I've been really lately digging more into encryption and trying to take this computer of mine, which is open and ripe for eavesdropping and for surveillance. I'm trying to take it and redo it all on all my computers back here and get them strong and ready so that I can be prepared for that big story that's coming my way as a journalist to expose this machine. And one of these positive tools was put out by the Committee to Protect Journalists. They released a list of ways to hide from eavesdropping, and some of these include surfing websites with the upgraded web protocols HTTPS. Some of you may have noticed this when you're searching the internet. It's HTTP :// whatever. But if there's not an S, HTTPS, then it's an unsecure website. The S stands for secure. This applies encryption to your whole connection and keeps you private. So that's a real basic one. There's also email encryption, PGP encryption, and text messages and phone calls can also be encrypted with the Text Secure and Red Phone apps for Android and Signal for iOS operating system. The thing I've been trying to figure out, what I was looking up last night, I can't find my phone, but I've got an old dumb phone, a flip phone, and some people say that you're kind of protected with those, but at the same time, I'm not going to fool myself and think that I can't be tracked. And specifically with one of the things we're going to talk about next, the stingrays, I know that my phone, despite being an older phone, it still sends out a signal, and that's really all the stingray needs, is because they're tricking your cell phone into thinking it's a cell tower so they can steal your signal and track you. So I'm trying to figure out how we can fight that, because the stingrays have been getting a lot of heat around the nation now, and I'm very thankful for this, because if you followed my work at all the past year, I've been following the stingrays, and really since last summer when Edward Snowden first started hinting and talking about these devices known as stingrays. But they've been used around the country by police departments for at least since 2007, 2008, they started ordering them. So I wrote an article for benswan.com called A Guide to Stingray Cell Phone Surveillance Technology. And of course all these links are going to be in the information whether you're watching or listening. But I go through here explaining exactly what a stingray is, the history of it briefly, and then some basic tips to know about these things. Just a couple things here real quick. Stingray is a brand name of an IMSI, International Mobile Subscriber Identity Catcher, targeted and sold to law enforcement. A Stingray works by masquerading as a cell phone tower to which your phone sends signal to every 7 to 15 seconds, whether you're on a call or not, and tricks your phone into connecting. As a result, the government can figure out who, when, and to who, and where you are calling, the precise location of every device within the range, and some devices even can capture the content of your conversations. Obviously, these are dangerous devices that they're saying they need in the war on terror. This is coming from federal grant money through the militarization of the police, the federalization of the police force. This is just another part of that game. It's as far as the Constitution is concerned, it's unconstitutional. 47 agencies in 19 states have these. 12 federal agencies, including, have all these equipment. And just this week in Houston, it got exposed that the Houston Police Department is using these. And I've known about this for a while. I've been keeping up with it, trying to get people to pay attention to. Now, thankfully, we got some local news media who are covering it, so we'll see if it gets some more light on it. But that's something that, like I said, the CPJ stuff, the encryption of smartphones, I don't know how to stop the Stingrays. There are people who are developing Stingray disruptors, and if you're in Houston, I'm going to be doing a presentation in the next month or so with the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union of Houston, and we'll be discussing more information about what the Stingrays are, how we can take this on, whether legislatively or through the lawsuits, or just ways that we can be subversive and avoid detection by these machines, which are pretty difficult at this time. So yeah, look out for that. Now, of course, Ferguson's been on everyone's mind this week as we prepare for whatever's coming. The announcement from the grand jury coming sometime in the coming days. We've been expecting it really all month. I bet that it's coming on Monday. I saw that 2 schools announced that they were going to be closed Monday and Tuesday and not even open up before Thanksgiving break. I think that there's whispers that Monday it's coming. I've also been trying to figure out if they would do it after Thanksgiving. Just most recent on there, state of emergency issued this week by Governor Nixon in Missouri. The FBI has sent more investigators out there. 2 people were arrested last night for allegedly planning to make pipe bombs. See right here the headlines. Ferguson experiences 3rd straight night of unrest. 2 in Missouri charged with lying on forms to buy guns ahead of grand jury decision. So obviously the media is hyping some of this aspects, trying to make it sound violent. My guess would be, let's see who these people allegedly making pipe bombs. Let's see how long they've known the FBI and if they're an FBI informant. That would be my first guess. The FBI is always my first suspect when it comes to terrorism. I don't know about you. So I will be going out to Ferguson maybe Monday afternoon. It really just depends. I want to get out there. I don't want to be out. I can't afford to be out there too long, but I want to be there. I wish I could be there for the community building. I don't want to just swoop in like the vulture media just coming to watch the shit hit the fan. I want to be there to be supportive of the community as they're trying to build, those in the community who are actually trying to do positive, good things. So look out for that. I'll be there. And if you want to contribute, of course, you can invest PayPal or BTC in my operations. Now, another thing before we get into the bigger news stories, the Rosebud Sioux tribe called the House of Representatives vote on the Keystone XL pipeline earlier this week an act of war, and they had said that if it was approved, they would lock their borders, close the reservation borders, and not let anybody come in to build the pipeline. Of course, the pipeline failed a day or two later in the Senate by, I think, 1 vote, and people are heralding this as a victory for the environmental movement. I've done videos in the past on the Keystone XL pipeline briefly. It's not going to bring any jobs like it promises. It's going to shift more economic power to foreign nations. It's going to hurt the environment. They're using eminent domain to build it. All around, I think it's a bad idea. I think it'll end bad, and it's going to further entrench globalization and the so-called New World Order, not help this country or really any of the people here. And obviously, it's going to be an assault on indigenous Americans as well. The sad thing is this fight is just beginning now that the Republicans have taken control or will be taking control in January. they're going to bring this bill back, and they likely have the support to get it all the way through the House and the Senate, but they might not have the support to get past Obama if Obama keeps his promise to veto. And of course, one sort of side note here, I would like to know what you as viewers, listeners, are more concerned with. You know, I write articles throughout the week. That's my profession now as a journalist, because I care about what's going on in the world, but also just because I got to get paid and I got to survive and eat like everyone else. But are you more interested in the news and what's happening, me keeping you up to date with that since I'm in that world? Or are you more interested in the philosophical side, or a mix of both? Because that's what I try to do, a mix of both. I try to go through here, ram in some stories, talk about things that are important happening in the world, and then also bring on some other events that we can take and turn into more philosophical conversations on how we can advance freedom. That's what I'm going for anyways. Let me know. Give me some feedback if that's working. But that's our news blast for the day. Lots of stuff happening. NSA reform, Barrett Brown, tips for journalists, stingrays, Ferguson, Keystone pipeline, lots of stuff. And this brings me to our next segment, which I will call This Day in History, something like that. Although it's the 22nd, 2 days ago, on November 20th, marked the 45th anniversary of action by the American Indian movement on Alcatraz Island. On November 20th, 1969, 89 American Indian boarded boats in Sausalito, California, and made a 5-mile trip across the San Francisco Bay to Alcatraz Island. Upon landing, they declared the former prison Indian land by right of discovery and demanded the U.S. government provide funding to turn it into a Native American cultural center and university. When their terms were ignored, the activists spent more than 19 months occupying the island in defiance of the authorities. Federal officials finally removed the last of the protesters from the rock in June 1971, but not before the occupation had started a national dialogue about the plight of the American Indian. This is from the History Channel website article commemorating the 45th anniversary, of course. And the reason I was stumbling into this is because if you listen to last week's show, I played a clip of activist John Trudell, and John Trudell was involved in this, and I've been really just falling in love with his work and his message. I feel like we're speaking on this from the same wavelength, just years apart, and I guess it's just that kindred souls thing where I feel like every time I listen to what he's talking about, I mean, back then he's talking about the federalization of the police, the militarization of the police. He mentions a New World Order a couple of times. He talks about how the powers that wish they were are doing to the American people and people around the world now what they did to the Native Americans. And I've been saying that for a while now. I learned that whenever I started reading Black Elk Speaks. Check out that book. I've talked about that before as well. It's a great book, history on Black Elk and him telling all he knew about sort of the last days of the American Indian, Native American fight against the European settlers. And I see that John Trudell and those who were fighting on Alcatraz, and then also 2 years later would be the last battle, the Battle of Wounded Knee, where Native Americans were again killed, all the way up until the 1970s. I mean, it's insane for me to think about that they've been struggling for 500 years, and John Trudell talks a lot about that. For 500 years, my people have struggled. And for 500 years, my people will struggle again if necessary. And I resonate with that so much, not as just my people, as somebody who has Native American blood and American Indian blood, indigenous blood here, both to Texas and to greater America. Like, my family is half Mexican, been here in Texas forever. And then the other part of my family is native to America. And then there's some Czechoslovakian and other stuff mixed in there. But so I resonate with this idea of, the people, but it's all the people of the earth, really. That's the thing, is that we are connected to the earth, and John Trudell preaches that message and has done so much good work over the past 40 years. So on November 20th is when the occupation began, but it actually started a month earlier. October 1969, a fire destroyed San Francisco's American Indian Center, An activist group known as Indian of All Tribes set their sights on the unused land at Alcatraz. A handful of protesters first journeyed to the island on November 9, 1969, under the leadership of Mohawk College student Richard Oakes. They only stayed for a night before the authorities removed them, but Oakes stressed that the landing had been a symbolic act. If a one-day occupation by white men on Indian land years ago established squatters' rights, he told the San Francisco Chronicle, then the one-day occupation of Alcatraz should establish Indian rights to the island. And the Indians of all tribes made a final attempt to seize Alcatraz in the early morning hours of November 20th, 1969, just before dawn. This time with an occupation force of 89 men, women, and children. After sailing through the San Francisco Bay under cover of darkness, the Indians landed at Alcatraz and claimed the island for all the tribes of North America. Yeah. Ignoring warnings that their occupation was illegal, they moved into the old warden's house and guards' quarters and began personalizing the island with graffiti. A message appeared on the water tower reading, "Peace and freedom, welcome, home of the free Indian land." Other buildings were tagged with slogans like "Red Power" and "Custer had it coming." The Indians' first proclamation to the public followed shortly thereafter in a manifesto addressed to the Great White Father and all his people. In it, they stated their intentions to use the island for an Indian school, cultural center, and museum. They claimed Alcatraz was theirs by right of discovery, but they sarcastically offered to buy it for $24 in glass beads and red cloth, the same price that Indians supposedly received for the island of Manhattan. The activists added that they didn't mind that the island was underdeveloped or lacked fresh water, since most of them had already endured similar conditions on government Indian reservations. And this would go on, as I said, for 19 months until they eventually, the government came on and made them leave. They ended up making them leave on June 11th, 1971. Armed federal marshals descended on the island and removed the last of its Indian residents. By then, the occupation force had dwindled to a skeleton crew of only 6 men, 5 women, and 4 children. So, one of the last but very important face-off between the indigenous Americans and the federal government, the United States. Thank you to John Trudell and everyone who participated in that and who continues to be a voice for resistance to this imperialism and this empire, because I have my own experiences and with working with Choctaw and looking at indigenous cultures of other nations, and really just feeling like, some of them are willing and have said, like, we're willing to stop this mine, this corrupt government, etc., with our bodies. Like, we're gonna fight to the death if we have to do this, because we have nothing left and this is the only way we know how to do it. And then I see other activists, indigenous activists, who in their older age seem to not to weaken, but to just become more reflective on whether or not that's an appropriate or not even appropriate, if it's an effective strategy. And I've been listening to some talks from John Trudell on that, on just reassessing. First of all, I think it's awesome that he just jokes that, like, we really going to buy into this idea of democracy? They're trying to tell us democracy, just vote, majority rule, etc., when they came in and took our people's lands and kicked us off, and they're going to talk to us about democracy now. I mean, it's a joke when you really think about it. And I'm glad that he makes note of that and really encourages Native Americans not to vote, not to buy into their system. And he's talking about, like, civil disobedience, is that effective? And really the last talk I was listening, he's promoting the idea of non-cooperation, which is, to me, right along with voluntarism and agorism, non-cooperation and just building structures, building something. And also, where I think that we're on that same wavelength, he's talking about conscious language, not using the terms of the oppressor, and moving beyond that, and then also fighting the tyrant within, and realizing that that's the ultimate battle, that they can't control you if you're free in your heart and your mind. I totally resonate with that. We got a couple more stories here. These are going to be our bigger stories. We're going to cover Mexico 43, G20, and it will end with talking about immigration, Obama and his immigration speech, and what the hell does it mean to immigrate, and whose land is this anyways? But first of all, on November 20th, the same day of the anniversary of Alcatraz, the Alcatraz occupation, international protests marked the kidnapping of the 43 Mexican students who've been missing since September 26th and are largely assumed murdered by the local gangs working with the police force and the mayor and his wife from Iguala in the southern state of Guerrero. Protesters marched this week in the streets of Mexico City, as well as Houston, Los Angeles, New York City, El Paso, Juarez, all through Mexico, all across the United States, and I'm sure in other... Oh, I even saw some in Paris and Barcelona. So lots of good actions taking place. And, of course, the people's desire for bullshit has been lessening, you could say, has been weakening in Mexico, where for weeks they've been burning government buildings, seizing municipal courthouses. Says government buildings have been burned, main freeways blocked as the nation reels from violence. And another day, December 3rd, has been identified as a day where 43 U.S. cities will hold rallies and protests in honor of the 43 missing students. And I've been talking to people who've been actively protesting down there in Mexico, and I've been even working on an operation to get myself out there. Of course, as I said, I need to focus on Ferguson, so we might be sending someone else out there from our team to do some reporting so we can tell you guys firsthand what's happening. In the meantime, a good documentary, first part of it just came out from Vice. I recommend checking that out. And I've written several articles on this if you want to know more about the situation. Now, the students are obviously important, and that's what sparked this. People are now saying they're sick of taking violence, and specifically from students. They've never had it. They said they've never seen anything like this. They're used to violence and the corruption, but they've never seen it focused on students who are out in the community trying to do good work. And now, regardless of the politics of the school that the students go to, because I've seen some people making, claims like, oh, they're Marxists and this and that. They were doing community building. They were trying to create something outside of the purview of the state, outside of the shitty infrastructure that has failed them, and the corrupt cops and the politicians. I mean, we don't need to get... My goal is to move people more towards the idea of liberty and freedom for themselves, and individuality and collective empowerment, not collective devaluing of the individual. There's a difference. But even if I don't see eye to eye with someone on everything, I'm not going to defoo them or kick them out of my life because of that. I'm going to find ways that we can work together. So if I see a community in another state, another nation, building in a way that I necessarily wouldn't, doesn't mean that I'm not going to support them. And I feel like there's a lot of real strict militant libertarians, anarchists out there who think that, like, oh, these people don't get it. They're not ANCAPs. They're not, market anarchists. So we can't work with them. Let's hate on them. Let's not support their struggle. And that's just retarded. People think differently. I don't want, like I said, again, I don't want a collective. I don't want a one size fits all. Anarchy to me is not, oh, everybody believe what I believe. And I know most of you get that. I'm just trying to stress that. So whatever they were building something outside the state. I support that. But now their deaths have sparked something bigger, where this is leading towards a revolution. I mean, there's really no doubt in my mind that that's really what people want. They want the president to resign. They want him to be held accountable. The corruption runs deep. It's not going to be fixed overnight, obviously. But this killing of the youth has now sparked something that cannot be stuffed away in the closet, cannot be put away as much as the politicians would like. So follow that. Mexico 43 is a hashtag going on around the internet. Keep up with it. I think I had 43 written on my hand. Last week was the G20, the meeting of the largest 20 global economies in Australia, Brisbane, Australia. And I believe I talked last week about online protests by Anonymous. They are hijacking the G20 hashtag and, tweeting out negative things, trying to bring up issues about Australia's surveillance state, the police state out there in Australia, which is, I might even say, further ahead than the United States. But there was also a large amount of protests from Australian Aboriginal Australians, black Australians, really the population that is largely ignored. But by the way, on that, if you haven't heard of a documentary or seen it called Utopia, check that one out. It's should be somewhere on YouTube, or if you search long enough on the internet, you can find it for free. Utopia, about Australia. Watch that and you'll see the way that, just like indigenous people the world over, Aboriginal Australians were brutalized and in some horrible ways. So on November 16th, to mark the G20, members of WAR, Warriors of the Aboriginal resistance burned 6 Australian flags in an act of defiance against the colonial state. A message to the Australian government and the Australian public that, quote, we will continue our resistance against the onslaught of colonization, the invasion of our lands and our lives. The Australian flag represents the pillars of colonial ideology, greed and racism. This ideology was alive, and Tony Abbott's recent comment from this continent that this continent was nothing but bush prior to the invasion in 1788. So, of course, he's referring to comments saying that the Aboriginal indigenous people weren't there and there was nothing. And this is sort of a common mode of thinking that seems to happen when it comes to, First Nations, that, like, in the Amazon, they still try to pull this shit and basically say that, oh, the natives, the indigenous cultures, they don't know how to farm, so we need to come bring them technology, when in fact they have vast knowledge of the rainforest, and it's like it's a pharmacy to them basically, and they have more knowledge than the Western world even understands. And this is the problem is with that first world way of thinking, that privileged way of thinking, that Aboriginals, indigenous populations don't have anything to teach, when in fact a love for Mother Earth and sustainability and working with the planet rather than destroying it are things that we should all take on and work to live by. So thank you to those in Australia who continue to resist that and to shed a light on that. And we've been talking a lot about international indigenous stuff today. I do try to keep my finger on the pulse of that. So I hope you enjoy learning more about the cultures that are being destroyed around the world by, I don't know if it's capitalism or if it's imperialism or if it's the state itself or what exactly we can link it to, or if it's just human nature, although I don't buy that. A couple days ago, President Obama gave a speech on immigration. This is Thursday night, and continuing to talk about it last night, Friday, in Las Vegas. And he's now unveiled his immigration reform, which, according to Reuters, is setting up a fight with Republicans. Those darn Republicans, they just hate all the brown people, and they want to stop Obama. Now, the bad thing about this, I asked some people about this on Facebook the other day, like, where do you feel about this? Like, what are your thoughts on this? Okay, you can argue as an anarchist, and I do argue this, that borders are meaningless, and they're just arbitrary lines on a piece of paper that some people came along and created, like John Trudell, like Black Elk, like plenty of other indigenous resistors have said for so long. There are people that were there. There was people there before them. Even in Europe, the tribes of Europe, they were indigenous people there. They got wiped out and taken over by the new royalty, and this just keeps happening. We just keep taking out the new population, and eventually, the people who become the new indigenous will then get wiped out for whatever the further plan is. So what I see is an issue where, on the surface, we want to immediately reduce suffering for people, and Obama's plan will ease the threat of deportation for some 4.7 million undocumented immigrants. Now, outside of the scared right-wing, people are taking our jobs and the welfare state and stuff like that, I don't really think that the United States infrastructure can support another 4.7 million people. That's not exactly what it's going to do, but it's going to allow them not to be arrested, to come in. Maybe they'll provide for the economy, things like that. They won't be threatened with arrest. That's a positive thing. I can look at that and I can be like, wow, this is saving some families trouble. They're not going to be harassed and beaten and sent across the border and families separated. And that's a positive thing. But then also looking at it with an awareness of the New World Order, global government, are they working towards erasing borders so they can establish this North American Union, federal police, things like that? I do believe in a global state, and it's push by these people. They want to create a global state to control. I mean, it just seems pretty obvious, and it's not even really, shouldn't be in the realm of conspiracy in any way. It's as obvious as paying attention and watching their motives, and that they would always want to collaborate and take control. Obviously, there's factions in here. I don't know if we should buy the on the surface tension between the United States and Russia, Putin, Obama, or if that's just some BS that we're being fed, while behind closed doors they're all working together. I don't know exactly how interlocked they are, but there are definitely factions that are vying for control. But still, we can see how, in their eyes, erasing borders might increase their ability to push for world government and monopoly, one-size-fits-all rule. So, as an anarchist, I say fuck the borders. I think it's great. Get rid of the borders. Let's move beyond these arbitrary things that weren't created by us and really start talking about who owns this land anyways, if people can own land. And this gets into other ideas of private property, where even indigenous activists like John Trudell seem to understand some of the points of private property, although he was saying it's silly because people came in here, colonized it, took the land from the people who are already existing here when they just imposed it, took it from them instead of working together. And then now they created private property and got us fighting over private property. But now they've also are establishing that private property is bullshit because they're just going to use eminent domain to take it back from us whenever they want it. So who does own the land? The truth is, we are all a part of the earth. That's what matters. We are a part of this earth, and it is up to each of us to decide how we want to respond and work with the people around us and the other people who we share this earth with. We can be a bunch of dicks. We can be a bunch of controlling, insecure, conniving assholes. Or we can work towards being beautiful, free, independent, conscious human beings who strive to educate themselves and others about the injustices in the world and to create solutions and do this all from a place of compassion. We can do this, and I believe that better world is possible and is being created. But in order for us to get there, we need to get past these silly ideas of immigration and ownership of the land, and really get to some place that we can agree upon what exactly we mean when we say humanity, mankind, collective ownership of things. We need to explore these ideas. Who's really going to own these things, and can we really own the earth, or should we learn to work together? And of course, this should not involve any force. I'm talking about voluntarily communion, voluntary community coming together and creating solutions that allow individuals to express themselves and live freely. So that's what I'm working towards, and I hope you will join me on that. That's the show for this week. Everything I covered, of course, there's so much happening that I sort of run through it. I want to keep you updated. As I said, I'm going to try to bring in some of the philosophy and the spirituality and the deeper thinking, but also keep you apprised of what's happening in the world. You can find more of these and more detailed at derrickbroze.contently.com. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at dbrozlivefree. Please do subscribe to our SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/TCR live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/consciousresistance. Please support Liberty Movement Radio, Uncorporate Media, and the Voluntary Virtues Network. If you ever feel like investing in the work we do, go to the website, the Invest tab. You can give Bitcoin, PayPal. Talk to me. Let's get together. Let's create solutions. I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Look for more content coming throughout the week. And as always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.
The government is critical to keeping the government in its place. But while government loves keeping an eye on us, it hates it when we keep an eye on it. Police in particular have been known to trample the constitutional rights of people all the time. What you have a right to know is that you absolutely can video and audio tape. The cops don't like that one bit.
That's why I be watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
That's why I feel the police, cause I'm
watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
Cause I can't trust the police. All I want is peace in these streets, but it seems like the biggest threat to peace is the crooked police. So hide your kids, and hide your wives, and hide your husbands too, cause they killing everybody around here, especially if you a young black male. These trigger happy cops wanna throw you in a jail cell. They'll search your house without probable cause, and if they catch you with a plant, they got you locked in their jaws. And if they bark or get aggressive, they might murder your dogs, cause they got guns and badges but ain't got no balls. And if you ain't noticed, the prison population's overcapacitated, full of good people who refuse to adapt to the matrix. That's why it's time for a revolution. So arm yourselves with your video cameras and your constitution. Restore your health and know your bill of rights, cause you might not even know that you got them until they're gone. Film a cop, it can save a life. Cause these trigger happy cops ain't behaving right. Film a cop, it can save a life. Cause these trigger happy cops ain't behaving right.
That's why I be watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
Why I film the police? Cause I'm
watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
Cause I can't trust the police.
We're not against cops. We're not against law enforcement. But we are against those criminal, coward, bully, cop thugs.
Look out for them boys in blue, hide to protect and serve. So why they got these peaceful people face down on the curb? It seems like they're the ones that's disturbing the peace. That's why I never call 911. Look, police, it's about damn time for some police accountability. They get away with murder and violent acts of brutality. They need to learn that badges don't grant them extra immunity. It's time for people to unify their communities against these thugs.
It's about time we protect and serve each other. We cannot keep letting these cops get away with murder. These criminals need to be held accountable.
That's why I be watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
That's why I film the police, cause I'm
watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me.
Cause I can't trust the police.
This song's for anyone who's ever been a victim of police violence or police brutality, and anyone who's ever lost someone they love, whether it's a friend, family member, or even a dog that was like family to them, all because of an overzealous, trigger-happy cop that decided to act as the judge, jury, and the executioner. May they rest in peace.
Film a cop, it can save a life. Cause these trigger-happy cops ain't behaving right. Film a cop, it can save a life. Cause these